Hey, you crazy cats! 42's live streams and videos are simply not available on vinyl. You will have to go to the YouTubes for that. So if you want content about British traditions and culture, cutting edge social commentary from an unapologetically patriotic perspective, along with a side order of madness you simply will not find anywhere else, then this is the place for you. And to all those early adopters in the chat, don't forget to hit the notification bell. That's how you get the good stuff and make sure you never miss a tasty treat. So with that being said and done, squeeze yourself in. Let's get into it. You know you want to. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Please delete as applicable because the internet is worldwide. Time zones are still a thing. And holy fuck, I nearly got me from the intro to being on the screen seamlessly. There was just a small glitch, but we are going to call that a win and let it run with that. I'll say a couple of hellos before we get started. First in tonight, Willie's Desert Hangar. What about you? Glad to have you here. The Budgie Burger is in. The funny comments are on tap. Captain Paka, what about you, chum? Anglo-Saxon, evening, brother. Going to be a few poems in this one, so I'm believing you're going to enjoy this. This is true. Lest we forget Amanda. There's Arms is in. Welcome aboard. Right. Before we get started tonight, which tonight may become a little bit ad-libby, we will see. There's a couple of things I want to cover, but we're in territory where I do tend to find tangents and stuff. So we'll see how it goes. But before we begin with any of that, we'll do a couple of shout-outs. The first one is for Rags, who probably is going to stream tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock. To be totally honest with you, I have no idea what the fuck's going on over there at the minute, but I believe he is still streaming. Who he has on with him, I have no clue about. I tend to be busy on Sunday evenings, so I'm not up to date with all that. Chaz Rosen, welcome. Glad to have you here. The second one is going to be for Robin. Courage is a cure. A girl from Australia. Keep you up to date with all of the information that's going on with the madness in governments on a worldwide basis coming out of Australia. And in the other hemisphere, we've got Rich, RPW Media, who does a very similar job, only with an American perspective. And RPW Media, very good resource if you go onto his website and you're looking for information about anything that's happened in America in the recent or even sometimes distant future. You can be pretty sure Rich is going to have some form of an article on it. And he's got a really good style of presenting. So there's that. And Bass is in over from Holland. What about you, chum? Rich is a top lad, and he is he's sharp as a tack. Welcome, Chairs. I'm going to be calling you Chairs because there's a few too many syllables for me to get my tongue wrapped around. Let's see. The other shout out that I always give is for the one, the only, the Dave Waffle House. Dave's Waffle House is home of the Friday night duck race, but much more than that. It is the pub. It is the place where you go any weeknight from 8:30. Just drop in, chill out. Cherries! Yes. Seahorse. 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 Right. I will try to remember that. Yep. Dave's Waffle House, home of the duck race. It's the pub. It's where we call in. It's not overly political. It's very light-hearted, and indeed, if you can take part in the chat, you will end up in the Friday night duck race. If you win the duck race, your name will go on the Wheel of Doom, and you can win anything from a Dave Waffle House mug to a tin of liquid ass. Yep. Tune in and drop out. That's exactly it. But it is a little bit like the Hotel California, because if you're a peak visitor, it's not long before you get to the point where you just can never leave. And the other thing I'm giving a shout out to, even though we're technically not past Remembrance Sunday and whatnot, and I generally do not do Christmas before Remembrance Sunday, but I am going to give you a little bit of a heads up for these little beauties. Check this out. These are personalized refillable burbles from Handcrafted by Emma G. The wonderful, delightful, sexy Emma G makes these things. One of these can be yours with a $5. You can refill it with sweets next year. It's a really good deal. If you email me at 42rights@yahoo.co.uk, I can get you a link to the shop. I need to get this sorted out for next week, and I will get a link to the Facebook page shop that I can drop in the chat. So if you're needing any of these for Christmas, you know exactly where to go to. And, you'll be supporting a wonderful person. So here we go. Now with that, and before we get into all of our Remembrance Day stuff, we're going to start with a little video of a poem, and this one is going to be one of mine. Yep, one momento. I will get this on the tubes of you. And this is called 11th hour, 11th day, 11th month. We will start it off as we intend to continue. When the old man asks, Geordie, where have you been? Have you seen the sights that I have seen? Will you simply say nothing? Will your face look blank? Being told his eyes witnessed flames dance on a tank. At Rorke's Drift I was engulfed by Sulu hail, and on the Somme where thousands fell, on beaches Juno, Omaha, sword and gold, I watched inhuman carnage unfold. I was the 50 at the Alamo, who stayed at their posts and would not go. I held centre ground at Waterloo, and in the air I was the few. I was stretchered off the battlefield, I made it home but never healed. I was both sides at Stalingrad, the barbarity there, it drove some mad. I care not how you came to my trench, only will you share that food upon that bench, and risk your life for the man on the right, in the madness of a fair fight. You see, Geordie, I am the army. I go where I'm sent by a government most probably bent. To earn their gold I was promised glory. Repatriation brings a different story. A accent of birth my side will choose. That's why khaki comes in many hues, and that decides which mother cries each time a war-torn soldier dies. So forget the colour, class and creed. Today just let some empathy breed. Let there be hush for a moment or two. That's the least all these heroes are due. Respect them truly, one and all, the ones that heard the trumpet call. And one last thing you ought to do. That's thank your God I did not call you. Ah, almost couldn't get myself back on the screen there, which would have been a bit bad. I'm mad. Um, hold, hold on. Right. That YouTube, there is indeed a line in the sand. Yeah, the YouTube video just kept on playing and it was getting at me and all, so we've got that sorted out. Right, here we go. Going to talk about Remembrance Sunday, Poppy Day, any way that you want to call that. And I want to talk a little bit about the history of it, where it came from, why we remember the way it was done, and the traditions of it. And Linda Hunter, in from Down Under, welcome aboard. Uh, and we will begin that with the history of the Poppy Appeal itself. It's actually called the Ard Hague Appeal. Uh, and here we go. I'll scroll this up a bit. Yeah, I'm pretty sure some of them have said that. And what I will say is, the soldiers might have won the war for us. It's been our job to win the peace, and we have not done that. But like everything else the British have ever uh, put their hand to, it seems like we spend the first fucking 3 quarters of it hand in hand deciding we're not really going to do anything until we've given the other side a fighting chance by getting way in front of us, and then we just change and decide to fix things, and they get fixed relatively quickly. So we will see. I would also say that we've been having a running battle since fucking 1066 with half of our country and about how the everything is remembered and whatnot. So yeah, right. Oh, I want to check how this is looking on the screen. I'm going to zoom that in just a little. Right. It's about the history of the Royal British Legion. The Royal British Legion has been supporting servicemen and women, ex-serving personnel, and their families since 1921, and we're not going anywhere. The British Legion was formed on 15th of May 1921, bringing together four national organisations of ex-servicemen that had established themselves after World War One. Because what we had after World War One was a bunch of people going about and basically doing their own thing. Everybody felt something needed done for these men coming back. And also, as we're going to come on to, this is not a new problem, and that the assistance for veterans being ad hoc. For example, um, in the workhouse in Belfast, where near where I live, because I live in Belfast, one of the members of the one of the men that fought in the Charge of Life Brigade died in the workhouse in Belfast because back in Crimean times, we did not do a lot for our veterans. Seems like not much has changed. Roger Kipling wrote a very good poem on it, which we will be coming to later. But this is not a new problem. So what had happened directly after World War II was there was four large groups that were trying to get something done, and it was decided that the best way forward was to bring them all into one cohesive unit. And they were the National Association for Discharged Sailors and Soldiers, the British National Federation of Discharged and Demobilised Sailors and Soldiers, uh, the Comrades of the Great War, and the Officers Association. I noticed that the Royal British Legion are making it a little bit difficult to see exactly which one was the Earl Haig Fund, which was the fund that started off with the poppies, but we will hopefully get to that. The amalgamation of these diverse bodies can be attributed largely to two men, Field Marshal Earl Haig and Tom Lister of the Federation of Discharged and Demobilised Sailors and Soldiers. Lord Haig served as the president of the Royal British Legion until his death. Earl Haig did not do this for personal gain, and the reason why he went on until his death was because he felt very strongly about it. The first ever poppy appeal was also held that by 1921, the tradition of the 2-minute silence had been established. The first ever poppy appeal was also held that year. Poppies sold out almost immediately and raised over 106,000, a considerable amount at the time. This money was used to help World War I veterans with employment and housing. I will also say that there are quite a few housing developments that were built from scratch for men coming back from World War I and again for World War II. I know that my great uncle lived in a house in a street called Earl Haig that was a white house, was a ex-serviceman's house. There's a larger ex-serviceman village on up the road, but this was like an isolated street of houses, and they all did come with a garden, which was a very rare thing in working class East Belfast for your house to actually have a garden. Most of us all had a little bit of concrete out the front and back, so there was an effort to actually provide these veterans coming back with a little more. Sorry, I just want to check the comments. It depends on the charity, mate. I have checked on the Royal British Legion. There is not a lot of that goes to running. There's not a lot of their outcome goes to wages, and they do genuinely put the money as much as they can to where it needs to go. But yes, charities are generally tax dodges. I'm not sure that they've suddenly turned into criminals' arms. But each free to have their own opinion. Yes, Charles, but here's the thing. Do you know why the British sold the Chinese opium? Because here's what happened. The Chinese, who were selling the British tea, decided that the only currency they would accept for anything they were trading out was silver. And they refused to pay for anything in silver, which meant that China, through tea, was creating was actually getting a monopoly on all the silver in the world. And the British found out that the only thing that was going to get the Chinese to let go of the silver that they were taking off the British for tea and refusing to use to pay for the opium, refusing to pay for anything else that they were being sold, was opium. And that's why the British sold them opium. And the Chinese got all fucking bent out of shape about it because, oh, those fucking British are selling us opium and the only payment they'll accept is silver, while all the time fucking forgetting all about the fact that they started that bullshit by refusing to give silver for anything else and refusing to trade tea for anything apart from silver. It's a small case of fuck about, find out. And that's what happened there. The major problem we have with our history is we keep on being told the little bit that we did that was absolutely fucking terrible and say absolutely nothing about the conditions that were placed upon us that caused us to do that thing. So there you go. Mr. Brad James, what about you, Sean? Another elephant in. Martin W. Yeah. So does every religion. Christians get tax exemptions as well. Oh, please. So, our red poppy is a symbol of both remembrance and hope for a peaceful future. The poppies are worn as a show of support for the armed forces community. The poppy is a well-known and well-established symbol, one that carries a wealth of history and meaning with it. Wearing a poppy is still a very personal choice, reflecting an individual experience with personal memories. It is never compulsory, but is generally appreciated by those who it is intended to support. I would never make wearing a poppy compulsory because that way I would not know which people are indeed cunts. Like James McLean. Was the inspiration and history behind the poppy? During World War One, most of the fighting took place on the Western Front. The countryside was blasted, bombed, and fought over repeatedly. Previously beautiful landscapes turned into mud, bleak and barren scenes where little or nothing could grow. There was one notable and striking exception to the bleakness: the bright red Flanders poppies. These resilient flowers flourished in the middle of so much chaos and destruction. They were also being fed by the nutrients of thousands of dead men, growing in their thousands. Shortly after losing a friend in Ypres, a Canadian doctor, Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, was moved by the sight of these poppies, and that inspiration led him to write the now famous In Flanders Fields. I'm going to read that poem now. In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely sing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders field. Take up your quarrel with the foe. To you from falling hands we throw the torch, be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep through though poppies glow in Flanders field, row on row. I'm going to go back again, and I'm also going to check the comments. Have they? That's a shock. I am quite surprised by that. And better still, I'm quite surprised the people inside the stadium put up with the club doing away with the poppy. That is actually quite sad. Where was I? Yes. So the spread of the poppy is a symbol. The poor man inspired an American academic named Mona Mitchells to adopt the poppy in memory of those who had fallen in the war. She campaigned to get it adopted as an official symbol of remembrance across the United States and worked with others who were trying to do the same in Canada, Australia, and the UK. Also involved in those efforts was a French woman, Anna Guerin, who was in the UK in 1921, where she planned to sell poppies in London. There, she met Earl Haig, our founder, who was persuaded to adopt the poppy as our emblem in the UK. The Royal British Legion, which had been formed in 1921, ordered 9 million poppies and then sold them on 11th November of that year. See, they were all sold on the day, uh, which puts an immense strain on the whole system, which is why we now start seeing the poppies being sold longer before. Because it ran into this problem. The poppy sold out almost immediately. That first poppy appeal raised over £106,000 to help veterans with housing and jobs, a considerable sum at the time. Today's poppy appeal, 40,000 volunteers distribute 40 million poppies. In view of how quickly the poppies had sold and wanting to ensure plenty of poppies for the next appeal, Major George Harrison set up the poppy factory to employ disabled servicemen. So if you were an ex-serving soldier, you could get a job in one of these poppy factories, and putting poppies together is very not dangerous. Actually, it would be very therapeutic. Great job for people that are coming back from a war. 1 second, I need to cough. Today, the factory in our warehouse in Herefordshire produces millions of poppies each year. The demand for poppies in England has continued unabated and was so high, in fact, that few poppies actually managed to reach Scotland. To address this and meet the growing demand, Earl Haig's wife Dorothy established the Lady Haig Poppy Factory in Edinburgh in 1926 to produce poppies exclusively for Scotland. So you've got Earl Haig working on this, you've got his wife working on this. This is what happens whenever couples get together and attempt to do some good with each other, as opposed to fighting each other, which comes on to a different subject that I like to cover. Oh, dysfunctional relationships. But this seems all very good and healthy. Today, over 5 million Scottish poppies, which have 4 petals and no leaf, unlike the poppies in the rest of the UK, are still made by hand by disabled ex-servicemen at Lady Haig's Poppy Factory each year and distributed by our sister charity, Poppy Scotland. And you can tell the difference where your poppy came from because the Scottish ones look different. Remembrance in UK today is very different than it was 100 years ago. People take part, whatever their political or religious beliefs, and the poppy remains a humble, poignant symbol of remembrance and hope. A lot of people believe that the British Legion do not act as politically as they should and do not advocate as zealously as they should. However, what we need to remember is in order for this poppy appeal and the Royal British Legion to continue functioning as it does, and I believe that depends a lot on where you live. For example, there is a very busy, very active Royal British Legion Hall in the area where I live that organises all sorts of community events and does lots of stuff. That is possibly partially the joy of living in East Belfast, where we do retain a very functional patriotic community. People in other areas may not fare so well. Oh, holy fuck. The new plastic-free poppy. Yes, they do need to be a little bit politically correct. Oh, I'm very sure that the majority of West Ham fans are Patriots. Uh, all sorts of problems with that. Uh, Not least that they become an opium field. Uh, is why we don't plant them on our lands. But for the record, the reason why the poppy's chosen is the red represents the sacrifice or the blood, the black represents the sorrow, and the fern, the leaf, represents growth and hope. Uh, and that's why it all ties in so well together. Oh, I'm not arguing about the good or bad of any of that stuff. I'm just saying that's probably why we don't have poppy fields. I also, at some stage, would really love to make it over to France and see the wild poppy fields. Now, with that, let's see, where am I? 31 minutes in. I want to have a quick check at what all else I wanted to go. Right, we'll do a little bit more on the poppy. It doesn't have to be, but that's the idea. Well, I know what type of. That tells me everything I need to know about the Stoke fans, Anglo. Oh, good plan, boss. Oh, whenever on a on a side note, whenever my mate Luke, who's English but lives in Australia, whenever him and his partner Rachel were over visiting, uh, the first thing I did was hand them both one of the little metal poppy pins and say, "Here's your East Belfast passport. What? Just put that on. Life will go much better. Life will life will go much better because if you do get in a conversation with anyone, they're going to know what you are and who you are before anything is said." Right, 1 second. Yeah, right. We will continue about the poppy. For the 2023 poppy field, we introduced new plastic pea poppy made entirely from paper, maintaining the iconic poppy design with the leaf shape. This has been the first time in 28 years, a new poppy has been devised. The plastic-free poppy is created from bespoke red and green paper manufactured by specialist papermaker James Krupa. The paper is made using a blend of renewable fibres and responsible sources, 50% of which has been recovered from the waste used in the production of coffee cups. More than 4 miles of paper are produced every year to create the poppy. Once manufactured, giant rolls of red and green paper are transported to the British Legion's warehouse in Kent, where they are loaded up onto specialist automated machines that cut and crimp the paper before assembling the poppy. Finished poppies are then packed and distributed across the UK from supermarkets and retail stores to local collectors and up and down the country. After Remembrance Sunday, the plastic-free poppy can be easily recycled at home via ordinary paper recycling options. We're not going to order a uh, paper plastic free poppy. That's not going to happen. Uh, so that is basically about the poppy. We'll take that out. And let's see what we're going to talk about next. The next thing we're going to talk about is the cenotaph. Boom, 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 boom. Yep. And this is coming from the Imperial War Museum. Share screen. Share screen. And then after this, we will have a musical interlude. So, actually, that could do with being a little larger. We'll zoom this in and you can read along. The Cenotaph in Whitehall is Britain's chief national war memorial to the dead of the First and Second World Wars and subsequent conflicts. Taking its name from the Greek words meaning empty tomb, it is the focus of the national ceremonies of remembrance held annually since 1919. So whenever you look at this building, it may be a shaped like a tomb, but it's an empty tomb. So it's there for remembrance and not to actually inter anyone. Designed by Edward Lutyens, the cenotaph is a work of great geometrical purity and sophistication. Its simplicity and austerity give it the universal quality, memorializing soldiers of all races and religions, except it was like, I'm going to get this out of the way here now. At least 99% of the English, Scottish, Welsh, and Northern Irish soldiers that fought in these conflicts were white, as were the Irish contingent, who were on the same side but to at different ends. They were white too. Now, the clue of this is in the name World War I and World War II. These wars went across the world. A lot of Africans fighting in Africa, a lot of Asians fighting in Asia, a lot of Europeans fighting in Europe. So, while this does represent everybody of all colour, class, creed, and all of that, the British people are remembering their fallen, and their fallen were white, with a few exceptions. There you go. Consider that covered. Right. So, burial and commemoration. By the end of First World War, over let's see, what's that, 1,000,000? I'm gonna find that out because that number's making my head hurt. 1,100,000. Yeah, 1,100,000 people. That's why that number made my head count hurt. By the end of the First World War, over 1,100,000 men from Great Britain and the British Empire had died in the conflict. Every community and family sharing some degree of grief from those lost lives. At an early stage in the war, a decision had been taken not to repatriate any of the bodies of the fallen, but to bury them in the war cemeteries near to where they fell. Furthermore, in the shocking intensity of the warfare on the Western Front, almost half of the fallen had simply disappeared. Many of the dead who were found could not be identified and had to be interred anonymously. This is what happens whenever you turn into red mist. This is also why the army are always quite interested in your weight, so they know how much stuff to put in the fucking body bag. None of the grieving families had graves to visit at home. Instead, across Britain and its empire, many thousands of war memorials were built in the war years, including private memorials to individuals, memorial crosses in parish churchyards, and municipal monuments in almost every town and city. Individual regiments and other military groups and formations built monuments to their dead, several of which are in central London. However, the cenotaph in Whitehall has always had a preeminent place as the nation's main place of commemoration of its war dead. Well, whenever they say has always had, from it was created, it had, I want to have a little bit of a tangent here and touch on a small fact here, something that I've got a slightly better understanding than most of have about what this does. Because what we had during World War One is all these people whose fathers, sons, uncles, brothers were dead, but they had no grave to visit. They had no funeral to go to. They were in mourning without any of the sights and sounds that normally facilitates mourning and deeply interrupts that process. You find this in two places with one of my granddads was a desert rat. My other granddad served in the Arctic convoys. Yeah, I would always have took you. Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know. You gotta be Genghis Khan. Well, the Genghis Khan's massive conquests. You've got your other guy that did quite well. What do you call it? The Roman Empire, obviously, and him that scooped the water into his shield. So, yeah, I would need to think on that. Pretty much any of the ones that the Vatican started. Our massive wars in Europe have mainly been started by the Vatican about how we pray. Strangely, I'm not sure, but to get back to where I was going, this is a real problem whenever you've got the French are not true anything. The French are, yeah, they are very mongrel and they have produced some very bad mongrel offsprings. Yeah, right. Get back to this. So all these people were losing all their family members and have nowhere to actually physically go to mourn for them. My grandparents, both on my mum's side, both died before I was born. I never really found out much about them, other than I always knew that my grandfather on my mum's side had served in the Battle of the Somme in World War One and had came back, but had all sorts of chest issues following that. That was life limiting, but whatnot. But they also did not have a headstone. Therefore, there was nowhere that my mother could go to grieve or show me and my sister, the grandchildren, the grave. And the reason for that was they were buried in the city cemetery in Belfast, which is off the Falls Road. And in the very early late 60s, early 70s, the Provisional Irish Republican Army went in and they broke all of the headstones, and they told the city council who care for that graveyard that if anybody fixed anything or tended the grass or anything inside that cemetery, that those people would be murdered. So from about 1960 to about 2012, my grandparents didn't have headstones, and that restricted not only my mother's grief, but it meant that I did not get all of the stories about my grandparents that I would have had, because it was very hard for anybody in the family to talk about them while their graves were still in that state. None of the grieving families had graves to visit at home and stayed across Britain. Right, bro. Before the 20th century, war memorials in England, as in the United Kingdom generally, had mostly been conceived as memorials to victory, wealth, and social rank, usually determined when individuals were commemorated. Many churches and cathedrals have monuments to commanders and officers who had fallen in combat. There were almost no monuments to the common soldiers and sailors who died and were buried in unmarked graves overseas or at sea. I think this is a little bit disingenuous. I think there are older monuments to people as a group, but English heritage does not look after those monuments, and therefore they don't really want to talk about them. A few memorials were erected to the dead of the Crimean War, 1853-56, and the Second Boer War, 1899-1902. Oh, fun fact. Guess who turned up on the opposite side in the Second Boer War, in Africa? Yeah, the fucking Irish made their way to Africa to fight the English. Make it make sense. Showing that attitudes were beginning to change. After the Great War, the scale of the loss and bereavement demanded a more fitting response in each community and at a national level. Although hostilities had ceased with the Armistice of 11 November 1918, peace was not formally established in Europe until the signing of the Treaty of Versailles on the 20th of June 1919. In the lead up, the British government began to plan a day to celebrate the victory and the peace which was due to be signed. 1 second, I need to cough. Whose history? Yeah, it turns out that a lot of things that the Irish say were done them just is not so. The Irish version of being enslaved was getting a job, by the way. Just saying. And if anyone were taken as slaves, it would have been by the Vikings. The Irish and the Vikings never did get on. Mind you, the Irish didn't get on with Ulster Scots whenever they arrived here, fucking invading our country. No, the Ottomans and the Moors and stuff, they took all sorts of sailors. They probably took more English sailors than they did Irish, given that England had a really large navy and a lot of maritime trade, and the Irish did not. The Irish apparently were same as Welsh Celts. Yeah, no, the Welsh aren't Celts, Sean. The Welsh woke up as Celtic in around about 1800. Nobody believed that the Welsh were Celts until the 1800s. And then we had the revisionist history that came in about the 1830s, which also changed a lot of England's customs and traditions. No, the Welsh are not Celts. Ugh. Right. They learned that the French government was planning a victory parade through Paris to be held on the 14th of July. The plans for which included a Capaflique as a memorial to the dead, which the passing troops would salute. Impressed by this idea, Prime Minister David Lloyd George asked Edwin Lewis Evans, the most celebrated British architect of the day, to design something similar. It was envisaged to be a temporary structure erected for the occasion. So this is like, we're going to build this, we're going to use it once, and then we're going to take it away again. Lutyens was apparently already thinking of designs for a war memorial in abstract form. A sketch by him of the design, similar to the eventual cenotaph, is dated 4th of June 1919. He developed his design very quickly. It was approved on 7th July, leaving only 11 days for it to be built by the Office of Works. Yeah, that's why it was approved so quickly. The wood, plaster, and canvas memorial was unveiled on the 18th of July on the present site outside the Foreign Office building in Whitehall. It formed one of a number of fushi for the victory parade the following day. The cenotaph made a deep impression on the public, and within a couple of days, over 1 million people had visited, a great many of them laying wreaths there. Luton's subtle design responded perfectly to the nation's sense of grief and loss. 2 days after the parade, the Times observed that the cenotaph is only a temporary structure made to look like stone, but Sir Edwin Lewis' design is so grave, severe, and beautiful that one might well wish it were indeed of stone and permanent. Edward Lutyens of 1869 to 1944, the son of a soldier turned artist, was article to the country house architect Sir Ernest George. He established his own practice in 1888, becoming a celebrated designer of arts and crafts houses in the south of England. After 1900, Tellson's work developed to include classical buildings inspired by the late 17th century English architect, in particular work of Christopher Wren. Lutyens became one of the last great architects of the classical tradition. Among his greatest achievements were some of the main government buildings in New Delhi, India. He was also appointed one of the architects of the Imperial and now Commonwealth War Graves Commission. In August 1917, Lutyens designed an altar-like stone of remembrance for the British war cemeteries, and eventually over 530 of them were created. It is a massive simplicity of clarity of design. It is one of the starting points for the design of the cenotaph. He went on to design several other memorials and war cemeteries, most notably the memorial to the missing on the Somme at Fifel, France, unveiled in 1924. And just up the road from me are streets called Somme Drive and Fifel Avenue. They are part of ex-servicemen's houses that were built just up the road from me on the Craig Estate, opposite where George Best grew up. All right, get some liquid on board. The public's wish for the first cenotaph to be replaced with the permanent version was unforeseen, but it was widespread and very strong. An alternative location on Horse Guards was considered, but Lewis favoured the existing Whitehall site, and on 30th July 1919, the Cabinet approved the idea of a permanent monument there. The design of the permanent version was very similar to that of the first, when Wren sent his designs to Alfred Mond on the 1st of November 1919. He wrote, "I have made slight alterations to meet the conditions demanded by the setting out of its lines on subtle curvatures. The difference is almost imperceptible, yet sufficient to give the sculpturesque quality a life that cannot pertain to rectangular blocks of stone. Uh, I will also say that this outpouring by the public to have it made permanent was backed up by the fact that the public just kept on coming and kept on coming and kept on coming day after day, week after week, month after month, because it was the only place they had to go and grieve, and they were coming from right across the country, and there would have been uproar had the canvas version been taken away without being replaced, and therefore we got the stone one. It's a really good use of people and pester power. The effect of this change, though, slight, can clearly be seen by comparing the photograph of the temporary cenotaph at the 1919 victory parade above with the image of the permanent vision below. So this is a temporary one, and this is a permanent one. And I will say the most striking difference I see in that is the colour. So I was just checking through the comments. Right, I need to. There's nothing drastically there that I need to attend to, and I need to get on with this. The permanent monument was built in Portland stone by contractors Holland, Haven, and Coupert for the Office of Works. It was unveiled by King George V at 11 a.m. on 11 November 1920, the second anniversary of the Armistice. In the same ceremony, the remains of an anonymous British soldier, exhumed from the war cemetery in France, were interred in Westminster Abbey for the tomb. Right, English Heritage, please fucking stop with this. I'm going to fix this. In the same ceremony, the remains of an anonymous British warrior exhumed from a war cemetery in France were interred in Westminster Abbey to form the tomb of the unknown warrior. Within a week, the cenotaph has been visited by over 1.25 million people and was 10 deep in flowers. And why a warrior and not a soldier? I'll tell you why. Because we have airmen, because we have sailors. And the unknown warrior could be from any of these branches, not necessarily a soldier. Thereafter, each year on Armistice Day, the main national ceremony of remembrance was held at the cenotaph. During the Second World War, the main service was moved to the near Sunday. During the Second World War, the main service was moved to the near Sunday to 11 November to avoid disruption to industry. And in 1946, the Sunday was formally adopted as Remembrance Day, embracing both the world wars and the subsequent conflicts, because heaven forbid they give us a fucking day off in the middle of the week to remember our war date. The cenotaph has remained the setting for the national ceremony ever since. The design, Luton's original 1919 design, was for a tall pylon supporting a sarcophagus or coffin adorned with laurel wreaths and the flags of the armed services. The permanent cenotaph is very similar to the first, but is made of white Portland stone with subtle adjustments. Its design methods were based on those for the ancient Greek architects of Parthenon, using these classical proportions. All of the surfaces subtly curve so that the verticals would meet at the point 1,000 feet above the ground, and the horizon's 900 feet to the side. The design of the monument guides the eye upwards in spiral motion from the plinth to the words, the glorious dead. The flags on the sides, the dates of the war, and the royal laurel wreaths, curved carved by the sculptor Francis Dwight Wood, and finally up to the scar- sarcophagus on the top. The sarcophagus is emphasized by its top molding, which casts a shadow, and a third of the wreath is visible at the top. During the design process, Leighton made several sketches with various variations, including a figure of a fallen soldier, figures of lions, and a flaming urn on top. But these were all dropped from the design. Instead, the genius of the cenotaph as a memorial lies in its abstraction as much as its visual perfection. With no human figure or no national or religious imagery, it can have a meaning for people of all races and all faiths, or none. Lurtons wanted to have sculpted flags on the sides rather than real ones, but in this one respect, the government disagreed. As a result, the cenotaph is dressed with the flags of Britain's armed services, which are periodically renewed. Loughton's vision was of a monument that would be universal in its significance. The flags make it a national memorial with specific military connotations. The cenotaph can be read in both of these ways and also in others. And I, for one, am very pleased that these flags were included. The other thing is, this is the national cenotaph, which means that the one in Belfast follows that design. Not exactly the same, but it follows the general idea. And that's what makes it so important for London cenotaph to be right, because it will be replicated not only just in across the United Kingdom, but also the Commonwealth. The cenotaph's influence. Alongside the cenotaph, war memorials were built throughout Great Britain. Some, such as the Cross of Sacrifice, designed by architect Sir Reginald Bloomfield, were specifically Christian in character and appropriate for churchyards and church cemeteries. Memorials for larger towns and cities were usually classic without specific religious imagery, probably for similar reasons to the cenotaph, in that they had to have universal significance. After 1919, the cenotaph was unveiled. Several towns and cities engaged Lyons to design their war memorials. He designed one of the first large town memorials in Southampton, unveiled on 6th November 1920, which is similar in form to the cenotaph, though with more sculptured ornament. Manchester's cenotaph is a close variant of the Whitehall design, with the two flanking obelisks and the recumbent figure of a soldier on top. Rochdale's cenotaph and the Marjorie Railway War Museum in Derry are somewhat more elaborate versions, again with recumbent features. This is why I was saying about the London one, the capital city one, needing to be right, because everybody else is going to follow off that. The cenotaph design was copied almost exactly in a number of other memorials. In the United Kingdom, there is the Queen's own Royal West Kent Regiment Monument in Mansdale. The overseas design was reproduced exactly for cenotaphs in Hong Kong in 1923, Auckland, New Zealand, 1929, London, Ontario, 1923, and Hamilton, Bermuda. So there you go. That is everything you need to know about the cenotaph. And with that, we are going to have a musical interlude. We have gone 1 hour and 4 minutes in. Where does time go? One never knows. And yeah, we're going to have the English. That's what's going to be happening now for a musical interlude. I got some like on board. Who are ye? in rags and rotten shoes, all dirty and bearded, blocking up the way.
We are English. We come from the edge of Europe,
beyond which lies only water,
ice and death.
This is the place we made our home,
raised our cattle, planted the crops, evoked their gods from circles formed of stone, so those gods could witness us atone.
When Roman forces did invade, we fought as lions, refused to yield, and those we left out in the field, of the English, they were the seed.
Who adversity did propagate, an indomitable people who we would fight, toil and mock in equal measure, and find humour in our adversity, because that is our way. The battle-weary tribes besieged by Vikings,
banded as brothers with Angles, Jutes and Saxons, took some years of consideration
to produce our culture of toleration. The creation of the English nation at Stamford Bridge we won the day, but William was quickly on his way.
1066, the commutation brought the cursed Norman invasion. A ruling class they would impose until calls for Magna Carta arose. And to all the kings the message was sent: you only rule us by consent.
So what of the English, I hear you ask? You know us as the working class, the ones whose toil, blood and sweat brought you the greatest empire yet. So you should learn at your mother's knee of revolutions that number 3.
That number 3.
1, 2, 3.
Agricultural, where mechanised planting and harvesting was married to selective breeding, we created a food surplus, the envy of the world. Industrial, where we conjured cities to house factories inhabited by a well-bred workforce to man the machines. This coupled to the ingenuity of English engineers who never found a problem without a solution. The third, the glorious one, that brought about civil and religious liberty, one rule for all, and the radical notion that a man should profit from his labours. But we are not greedy. We exported our language, our law, our sense of fair play. In our safe shipping lanes trade flows through never-ending day.
And when Britannia ruled the waves,
we used our power to free all slaves. We managed the world and allowed all others to travel in the social order we created with humour in adversity, because that is our way. Achievements we have too many to list. From this small kingdom God has kissed, we travelled the world from the highest mountain to Arctic's Carpatic, tundra and back again. The traces of our kindness are in our railway lines that transport the world to work, our compassion in the water systems that hydrates foreign soil.
We left everywhere better than we found it, because that is our way.
I could list another thing or two, like how we taught the world to queue, but I'll leave that for another occasion. It's time to have a celebration, admire the wonders of our creation. To our ancestors, homage we must pay for doing things the English way. For we are the English, and this is our day.
who are ye? In rags and rotten shoes, all dirty and bearded, blocking up the way.
We are the pilgrims, master. We shall go always that little bit further. It may be beyond that last blue mountain barred with snow, across that angry or glimmering sea. We are the English.
Every Englishman's house is his castle. So hoist your colours on the ramparts for England Day. Then down after St George's Day. We are English, and we'll be patriotic in an organised way.
Wally, thank you very much for putting that link in. Where did it go again? Yeah, England Day. Sub to that, people. And please, share out that flipping song. That still has less than 300 views. This is absolutely nuts. I don't know. It seems to me people are deliberately ignoring it and not putting it in front of people. But, you know, it would help. It would absolutely help. If we want to take this country back, we're going to have to all do our own wee bit. And that England Day thing, that project, is one way that we can do it that cannot be stopped. The only thing that can stop England Day from working and changing the shape and nature and look of this country, at least for one day a year, is English people not taking part. So if we can get more people to know about it and maybe take part, then we can begin to get a bit of change. Oh yeah, don't worry, take your time. You've got until April, chum. You know, the biggest difference I see between Northern Ireland and England is that in Ulster we have had hundreds of years of knowing that if we want things to stay British, that we need to do them for ourselves. That has not been the case in England for whatever reason. And this is not to dig anybody out and say, you haven't done this or you should be doing that, or the other. Here's an opportunity. What about we get behind it and fucking push? It's like a rugby scrum. Get behind it and heave, people, please. And with that, we'll take that away from the studio and we will now have a look at the Unknown Warrior. We will do that. And then totally. And also, what's worse in Wales is you have a lot of people in Wales that just don't want to be British, and they have filled you with a false version of history and actively worked against you, which is quite disgusting. But there's no reason why we can't get it back. There's no reason whatsoever why we can't get it back. Shezu, earlier you were saying about we've conquered the plague, we've conquered the Black Death. We have been resilient against everything and anything that's ever been thrown against us, and there's no reason why we cannot succeed again. I'm going to make this a little bit larger. Okay. The mysterious story of the Unknown Warrior. The grave of the Unknown Warrior in Westminster Abbey contains the remains of unidentified British serviceman who was first interred in 1920 as a way of honouring the falling of the First World War. The selection of the Unknown Warrior was a secretive event and remains shrouded in mystery to this day. Here, curator Justin Saddington looks into some of the long-standing controversies and lesser-known stories surrounding this enigmatic figure. And here's a nice little picture of the wagon carrying the coffin. The grave of the Unknown Warrior contains the remains of one of many thousands of British service personnel killed in the First World War, but whose bodies could not be identified. Although created to honour and commemorate all of those who died in British service, it also serves as a special symbol for those recorded as missing in action. Because what's worse than knowing that your loved one is buried in plot number 3746 at whatever cemetery in France that you might get a picture of, is knowing that your loved one is buried in somewhere in one of those graveyards, and it says on their headstone unknown, and you get to pick one of all of those unknown soldiers ones. It really does impede your grieving process. So now they actually with this they get a place where they can go, and it's as everybody's got an equal chance of it being their relative. You have no idea, so at least you're me a chance. And it's marking that person. The unknown warrior was carried back from France and then reverently buried in London's Westminster Abbey on the 11th of November 1920. His grave is one of Britain's most important war memorials. Over 1 million people queued up to visit in the week following its burial, and it still attracts large numbers of visitors. And indeed, the day that I went to visit that, whenever I was, 15, 16, I think it was in London for a small trip, and went to visit. There was plenty of people about. Let's just say it wasn't on this random Tuesday afternoon, there was still quite a lot of people there. One of the longest standing mysteries surrounding the unknown warrior is who came up with the idea. The confusion arose because the idea seems to have been conceived independently by both a Briton and a Frenchman in 1916. It seems clear now that the first to do so was David Rowland, a chaplain serving in the British Army on the Western Front. He later described how his inspiration came in August of that year during a moving encounter with a rough wooden cross at Armistice in France, on which was inscribed an unknown British soldier of the Black Watch. So I thought and wrestled and thought, what can I do to ease the pain of a father, mother, brother, sister, sweetheart, wife, or friend? Quietly and gradually, there came out of the mist of the thoughts, and the answer was clear and strong. Let this body, a symbol of him, be carried reverently over the sea to his native land. Just a few months later, in November 1916, Francis Simon, president of the Rennes Remembrance Society, proposed that the remains of an unidentified French soldier be interred in the Pantheon, the resting place of the great figures in French history. Because Rowland initially kept the idea to himself, it was the French suggestion that entered circulation first. I am not surprised that in French circles and British circles, this idea was circulating. It's just something that would have came up. This inspired a similar proposal by the Daily Express in 1919, which was backed by the Comrades of the Great War Association. The idea was initially rejected by the British government, mainly on the basis that the cenotaph had already become established as Britain's national war memorial. 1 second, I need to cough. All right. The idea may never have gained acceptance had Rowland not belatedly taken action in August 1920. He wrote to Herbert Ryle, the Dean of Westminster, with the suggestion that the body be returned from the Western Front for burial in the Abbey. Ryle succeeded in getting the Prime Minister, David Lloyd George, and the Chief of Imperial General Staff, Field Marshal Sir Henry Weston, to adopt the idea. Sorry, people, having a little bit of an issue with the coffee. These men in turn won over both the cabinet and the initially reluctant King George V. Winston told the former that no words could tell how proud we officers and men would be to have one of our simple soldiers buried in Westminster Abbey. In mid-October, a committee was hastily assembled to oversee the scheme. Plans were put in motion for a body to be returned from France for burial on Armistice Day, 11th November, just 3 weeks later. Despite the lack of time, everything went to plan. The unknown warrior was buried with great solemnity and as part of a dual cemetery, which was also the unveiling of the newly built cenotaph. After some debate over the appropriate location for their grave, the French finally chose the Arc de Triomphe over the Pantheon and made arrangements for a ceremony to take place on the same day. Another source of confusion was discovered within the minutes of the Memorial Services Committee, the body set up by the government to plan the scheme. Those contained the revelation that the chosen body was to be that of a man who died in 1914. The reason for this was a request from the Abbey authorities that the body needed to be fully decomposed, presumably to avoid interring a rotting corpse. If carried out, this plan meant the unknown warrior would most likely be a soldier of Britain's pre-war regular army known as the Old Contemptibles, in mockery of an insult made by Kaiser Wilhelm II. While the government did issue a statement informing the public of this decision, they also included the dubious and contradictory assertion that the unknown soldier could be from one of the Dominion forces, or be an airman, or a sailor, or Royal Naval Division. Significantly, the detail that the chosen man was a soldier of 1914 has largely been forgotten. By contrast, the idea that he could be any one of the British Empire's missing has become well established and part of the mythology. An analysis of the methodology employed by the men who undertook the selection suggests the truth lies somewhere in between. The unknown warrior was most likely British and not from the Empire. Of course, he was fucking British. But it also seems likely that he could have died at any point in the war, and so was by no means certainly to be an Old Contemptible. I think there's a bit of revision going on here. I don't think he was an Old Contemptible because he was washed. The most contentious part of the unknown warrior story concerns a mysterious selection process. This was undertaken in great secrecy by army units based in France and Belgium. It involved the exhumation of a number of unidentified bodies from cemeteries situated in various battle areas along the Western Front. There was four of them. These were taken to a makeshift chapel at the Army's headquarters in St. Paul, near Ars, in northern France. Here, the commanding officer, Brigadier General Louis Watt, made the final choice. No official record of how it was done was ever released, and so many different versions of the story have been told that there are many long-standing disputes on points of detail. The most significant problem resulting in secrecy was a persistent rumour and circulating during the interwar period that the identity of the body was known in government circles. However, this is contradicted by later accounts of the men involved, and the unknown warrior's anonymity is proven beyond dispute by one of the few surviving contemporary documents relating to the process. This is a letter written by Colonel J. Bostick, an army officer at St. Paul at the time, to a colleague in the War Office. The letter concerns the inaccurate press speculation on the origins of the body, which Bostick addressed by briefly outlining the selection method employed and giving his assurance that the body's anonymity was preserved. He states, "You can say with absolute certainty that no one in this world knows where he came from." I'm going to skip through that. One curious inaccuracy that crept into the story concerns the dates on which the selection took place. For many years, the dates 7th and 8th of November 1920 were used, as these had appeared in the most authoritative known accounts, which had been written by Watt for the Daily Telegraph in 1939. In 1939, it's 20 years later, Sean. That's not contemporary. This was challenged by Andrew Richard in his book The Flag, the story of Robert David Rotting and the Tomb of the Unknown Warrior. Richard notes that these dates did not square with what was known about the rest of the Unknown Warrior's journey from St. Paul to London. The correct dates of 8th and 9th November have now been found on earlier handwritten accounts by Watt, kept at the Imperial War Museum in London. These have been corroborated by several other sources. These include a memoir held to the archive of the National Army Museum, written by Ford Bow, who was serving at St. Paul with Queen Mary's Army Auxiliary Corps. Bordy did not witness the selection firsthand, but noted the dates and time and events which accorded with Watt's earlier account. The longest standing question surrounding the selection process concerns the number of bodies involved. Wilt's figure of 4 bodies contradicts the other accounts, notably of Senior Chaplain George Kendall, which states that 6 were involved. Other plausible figures are 3 and 5. This issue cannot be settled beyond dispute. However, 4 remains the most likely figure, as it is backed up by 2 further important sources from participants: an account written by Major General Smith in 1978, really fresh in the mind, and a set of secret orders issued to Captain Albert Fisher of 14 Graves Registration Unit on 6th of November 1920. This one looks to be accurate. Significantly, while these sources are all in accord at this point, they diverge on what become the most intriguing issue of all: the final resting place of the bodies that were not chosen. Well, they went back to being missing, didn't they? Watt's accounts state that the unselected bodies were buried in St. Paul Cemetery. This was first challenged by Smith, who wrote that he had been part of the team tasked with reburying them. He described how the original plan to bury them in St. Paul was dropped because of the appearance of 3 new graves there would have made it obvious that these were the men who had been involved in the selection, and this would have been detrimental to the secrecy in the process. And the fact that there would be 3 graves leads me to believe that there was 4 fucking chosen. You absolute lunatics. Instead, Smith described how his team reburied them 50 miles away along the Albert Bapaume Road, Albert Road and Bapaume Drive, up the road from me in East Belfast. It was their hope that these graves would be discovered by body search parties working in that area, and then would be reburied completely and anonymously elsewhere. Smith also related how he later checked the burial records, which stated that these 3 bodies from the area had indeed been discovered reburied, although it is not known where. Smith's version was seemingly confirmed by the grave records of St. Paul Cemetery, which show that the last burial to have taken place was in July 1920. Right. I'm skipping bits here, by the way. Here we see the inscription on the tomb. Beneath this stone rests the body of a British warrior, unknown by name or rank, brought from France to lie among the most illustrious of the land, and buried here on Armistice Day, 11th November 1920, in the presence of His Majesty King George V, his ministers of state, the chiefs of his forces, and vast concourse of the nation. Thus are commemorated too many multiples who during the Great War of 1914-1918 gave the most that any man can give, life itself, for God, for king and country, for loved ones, home and empire, for the sacred cause of justice and freedom of the world. They buried him among the kings because he had done good towards God and towards his house. Now, that is the unknown soldier, and I'm going to have to. There's more stuff I want to get on to, so we're going to drop that there. We're going to have a little bit of Rudyard Kipling, and here we go. Last. Yep, that's what we want, the last of the Light Brigade. And suddenly I can't find it. Yep, now we've got it. Just the advertisements. It's forcing me to endure 2 adverts before it lets me skip. Here we go. Share screen.
The Last of the Light Brigade by Rudyard Kipling. There were 30 million English who talked of England's might. There were 20 broken troopers who lacked a bed for the night. They had neither food nor money. They had neither service nor trade. They were only shiftless soldiers, the last of the Light Brigade. They felt that life was fleeting. They knew not that art was long, that though they were dying of famine, they lived in deathless song. They asked for a little money to keep the wolf from the door, and the 30 million English sent 20 pounds and 4. They laid their heads together that were scarred and lined in grey, keen were the Russian sabres, but want was keener than they. And an old troop sergeant muttered, "Let us go to the man who writes the things on balaclava the kiddies at school recites." They went without bands or colors, a regiment 10 files strong, to look for the master singer who had crowned them all in his song. And, waiting his servant's order, by the garden gate they stayed, a desolate little cluster, the last of the Light Brigade. They strove to stand to attention, to straighten the toil-bowed back. They drilled on an empty stomach, the loose-knit files fell slack. With stooping of weary shoulders, in garments tattered and frayed, they shambled into his presence, the last of the Light Brigade. The old troop sergeant was spokesman, and, "Begging your pardon," he said, "you wrote to the Light Brigade, sir. Here's all that isn't dead. And it's all come true what you wrote, sir, regarding the mouth of hell. For we're all of us nigh to the workhorse, and we thought we'd call and tell. No, thank you, we don't want food, sir. But couldn't you take and write a sort of to be continued and see next page o'er the fight? We think that someone has blundered, and couldn't you tell him how? You wrote we were heroes once, sir. Please, write we are starving now." The poor little army departed, limping and lean and forlorn, and the heart of the master singer grew hot with the scorn of scorn, and he wrote for them wonderful verses that swept the land like flame, till the fatted souls of the English were scourged with the thing called shame. They sent a check to the felon that sprang from an Irish bog. They healed the spavined cab horse, they housed the homeless dog, and they sent, you may call me a liar, when felon and beast were paid, a check for enough to live on, to the last of the Light Brigade. O 30 million English that babble of England's might, behold, there are 20 heroes who lack their food tonight. Our children's children are lisping to honor the charge they made, and we leave to the streets and the workhorse the charge of the Light Brigade.
There you go. That's a bit of Kipling talking about what happened to the men that fought in one of the most famous battles that Britain has ever fought. And some of them ended up in the workhouse. We have a long history of not looking after our veterans, and that needs to change. I do know that in Belfast City Hall, we had a vote recently to enact the Covenant in full, which is supposed to be the deal between the army and the British government that we will go and fight your war for you, and whenever we come back, missing part of our body and part of our mind, you will indeed look after us. The government seem to have dropped the ball on that, most notably the government, who strangely control the fucking Justice Department, are allowing our veterans to be fucking trailed through the courts. The Chelsea pensioners that you've seen, or you may have seen tonight on BBC, when the Royal British Legion commemoration service was on, the Chelsea pensioners came out. Well, one of those Chelsea pensioners has spent the last couple of years being fucking dragged around courts in Belfast because he happened to be a paratrooper on Bloody Sunday. And that is absolutely fucking disgusting. And that needs to change. Now, I'm going to do my segue into the other thing that I wanted to talk about tonight, which is going to be very, very, very short. Well, it's the second thing we'll talk about. It's going to be very, very short because we are fastly running out of time. But what I'm going to show you now is a few minutes. Well, I'm going to play about 5 minutes of this. And it's news reporting from Northern Ireland from Remembrance Day a few years ago. Buckle up, strap in. You may remember this, you may not. Or it may not have been quite a big thing in England. This is news footage from a Remembrance Day event in Northern Ireland.
A Remembrance Day atrocity in Northern Ireland. A bomb has killed 11 and injured more than 60. It was planted a few yards from the War Memorial in Inniskillin. It went off without warning as the Remembrance crowds were gathering. A building collapsed on top of them. 13 children are among the injured. The Queen is deeply shocked. She sent her heartfelt sympathy. The Prime Minister says the world will condemn it.
Is really desecrating the dead and a blot on mankind.
Good evening. Shortly before 11 o'clock this morning, as the nation was about to draw together for its annual act of remembrance, a bomb exploded near the War Memorial in Inniskillin, County Fermanagh. The crowd which had gathered there was given no warning. They were civilians, Catholic and Protestant, young and old, there with their wreaths to remember. The bomb killed 11 of them and injured 63. The dead included 3 married couples, a retired policeman, a caretaker and a nurse. Many of the injured are in a very serious condition. Of the 63 taken to hospital, 13 are children between the ages of 2 months and 15 years. So far, the IRA has said nothing, which is unusual. News of the explosion reached London just as the Queen was leading the Remembrance Day ceremony at the Cenotaph. She called the attack an atrocity. She said she was deeply shocked. The Prime Minister said it was utterly barbaric, an act of inhumanity against the living, of desecration against the dead. In Dublin, Charles Hockey, Prime Minister of the Irish Republic, said the culprits must be utterly repudiated and brought to justice. Archbishop Robin Eames, the head of the Church of Ireland, who was at the scene himself, said he wished those who'd planted the bomb could see what he had seen. Enniskillen is a town with a proud military tradition. It sent many soldiers to the battlefields of the First and Second World Wars. This morning, the War Memorial was a solemn and silent place as people gathered there. At 10:45, the bomb went off in a hall a matter of yards away. The building collapsed on top of the waiting crowd. This evening, the Chief Constable of the RUC said the building had not been searched before the service. He said
the building had not been searched before the service because it belonged to the Gaelic Athletic Association and they refused to permit access to the people who were supposed to search the building.
He was in no doubt the bomb was the work of the IRA. The scenes immediately after the bomb went off were recorded by a local man who was there with his home video camera for the ceremony. Our first report tonight is from Michael Sullivan.
At the very moment when they were to have been standing in their ranks in silence, remembering the dead of 2 world wars, soldiers in their ceremonial uniforms were scrabbling in the piles of fallen brickwork and masonry in Enniskillen's town centre, digging out the civilians who'd been buried in the explosion. The bomb exploded at 11:15 as the townspeople moved into place around the War Memorial, waiting quietly in the cold for the Remembrance Day ceremony to begin. They were pensioners, women and children, the respectful onlookers waiting for the soldiers and ex-servicemen to march into place, like hundreds of thousands of others in towns and villages all over Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The bomb had been hidden in an old school building, a familiar landmark only a few yards from the War Memorial. Whether it was timed or detonated by remote control has yet to be established, but it blew the building apart, filling the air with flying rubble which killed most of those who were buried and injured more than 60 others.
Hey! Get a load over here and carry them! Pass them over the rubble into the building!
Had the bomb gone off during the ceremony itself, the death toll would have been still greater. But young soldiers who'd been waiting in their ranks at a distance to march into place survived to join the rescue. The injured were taken to Enniskillen's Erne Hospital, the dead to a makeshift morgue in a local territorial army depot. During the day, the list of known dead slowly grew until it reached 11. The county of Fermanagh has suffered a high level of terrorist activity. The whole route of the Remembrance Parade had been searched, but the bombers had found a way of placing their explosives where no one thought to look and detonated them at a time when nobody really thought they would.
Well, the reason why they bombed that place at that day is because they had all year to fucking plan for it. I will say that we got extremely lucky because the other 2 bombs that they had planted on that day intended to blow up the Boys Brigade and the Girls Brigade and the Boy Scouts. Yeah, the fucking children were standing right beside a bomb. The story is that a cow chewed through the command line that ran across the fence. So that is, and had that worked, they would have pretty much killed every Protestant child in the city because they were all there to go to do their little bit in the parade. You may ask, where's the segue in this? Well, there's a couple of segues. There's one thing. A lot of people say that I'm a bit hard on the Irish and I don't trust them. Anybody who's watched that knows why. They're not fucking trustworthy. and that is Willie. See all the Irish Americans that sent their money via Dorothy to buy the bombs. That's what they bought. But the segue is actually this event happened on that day because they knew the people would be there to want it to blow up. In quite a similar way, that on the 5th of November, and Guy Fawkes and the Gunpowder Plot, that was a plan to murder the king. And the reason why it was in Parliament, because they knew the king had to be there for the opening of Parliament. And that's where they used the opportunity of the routine. Yeah. And now that you've seen the result of an unexpected building, bomb in a building with masonry and everything firing out, you can see exactly why the gun plot would have worked. If you're talking about a thingy ranch, maybe let me have a think about this. I am very reluctant to start the whole moderator escalation because we do have a couple of moderators who are generally here, and we also don't have a lot of moderation work to do. We don't have a lot of trolls turn up, but Commander Classified, bear in mind, I will be having a rethink about a lot of stuff about this channel. For one thing I want to do is I want to start producing some videos standalone where I do like 10-15 minutes and it's all properly scripted and whatnot. Put some visuals over the top of it. I want to try and start doing that. And if one of the things that I change is to bring in more moderation, I will definitely put you like near the top of that list. Thank you. Thanks, mate. Thanks so much for that. It's part of the problem is if everybody's a moderator, then nobody is. And we've got a really nice chat here and everything's all cool. I don't want to be rocking any boats and creating drama out of nothing. Where was I? Yes, so the Gunpowder Plot, because we've also just had Guy Fawkes night. That happened where and when it did because they were able to plan it, and they did it, and the plan was to do it with a bomb. The next bit of the oh yes, I know how I'm going to do this. Oh, Budgie. I don't know how you could make a ranch funny, but I know that you would. You actually possibly give me an idea. Oh, fuck. Nah, yes, here's what we're going to do. Where is this? Gunpowder Plot, Britannica. Oh, there we go. I've got the full version of the Guy Fawkes poem. Remember the 5th of November. Gunpowder, treason and plot. I'm guessing if anybody has heard the rest of that, it would be Brad. but I'm not even sure about that. I heard a little more than the normal, but I had never heard this much detail in it. So we will give this a go. Yes, I see no reason to. Now check this out. We'll actually zoom this in a little. Remember the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason, and plot. I know of no reason why gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. Guy Fawkes and his companions did scheme to contrive to blow the king and parliament all up alive. 70 barrels laid below to prove old England's overthrow. But by God's providence, him they did catch with dark lantern, lighting a match, a stick for a stake, for King James' sake. If you won't give me one, I'll take two. The better for me, the worse for you. A rope to hang the Pope, a pen'orth of cheese to choke him, a pint of beer to wash it down, a jolly good fire to burn him. Holly boys, make the bells ring. Holly boys, God save the king. Hip, hip, hurrah. And that's the first thing. Yeah. I knew as far as I see no reason where gunpowder and treason should ever be forgot. I heard that much, but I hadn't heard the rest of that. And that actually brings in the rest. It brings in the plot properly. It shows it's a Catholic plot. I will say that it's leaving out some details, which it would need to, because let's face it, where you're going to get kidnap a 9-year-old princess, put her in the king, and get ruled by the Vatican. But I was really pleased to find that, and I'm also very pleased to be able to share that with the rest of you. And that pretty much is going to conclude tonight's show. Oh, they are. They really, really are. I can't get my head around it. I can't get my head around the other thing is I can't get my head around the fact that they haven't ever looked into the fucking story. You know, the thing, yeah, he tried to blow up Parliament. Well, see, here's the thing, Special K. People go to Anonymous because they think they've got the lowdown and everything. But what Guy Fawkes was attempting to do was murder the king, kidnap a 9-year-old princess, have her installed in the throne via an uprising of Catholics in the Midlands, and then take all of the orders direct from the Vatican. Now, the people who are supporting Anonymous, are they after a Catholic uprising and a 9-year-old princess and changing the throne and all of that? Because if they're not, they obviously have no fucking clue about the person they chose to make as their emblem. Or else maybe they do, and they just don't want you to think too deep into it. I don't know. Possibly. Oh. Who do you think, if you're going to be serious about this and say who is Anonymous, what group or organization would choose to make him their anonymous figurehead? That would be the Jesuits. Because it was the Jesuits that sent fucking Guy Fawkes. So yeah, good probability that the Jesuits fucking started that whole thing off, if anybody. But there we go. Rich, what about you, Sean? Really glad to see you here. Although you have just sort of managed to arrive at the end, which is unfortunate. But there you go. Yeah, I don't know if who would choose Guy Fawkes as their icon. The people that sent Guy Fawkes in the first place, possibly. I honestly don't know. Yeah, they're not bad judges. You know, the Jesuits have got their own thing going on. People worry about the fucking Masons. How do you get them on to build the bonfire of popes? Oh, fuck. I don't know. Yep. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to say, Bonfire Night not only commemorates the Gunpowder Plot, it also remembers the human candles, the Protestant martyrs who were burnt at the stake. The reason why Lewis has got the biggest bonfire celebration is because Lewis was the site of the largest mass burning of human beings, which was 17 to 1 go. Bloody Mary tended to like eating chicken, drinking wine on a Friday afternoon and watching a Protestant getting burnt at the stake, and she averaged one a week throughout her reign. So yeah, Remembrance Day also remembers that. Probably a reason why the Catholics aren't very fond of having that whole story put out, because apparently remembering that they did that makes the Catholics look bad, and it wasn't them fucking burning their political adversaries to death that makes them look bad. It's the fact that people remember that. Yep. And by the way, it wasn't us that burnt the witches. Everybody says we used to burn witches. No, the Catholic Church used to burn witches, which is quite different from we burnt witches. It wasn't a collective decision. It was the decision by the church. And with that, I'm going to do an outro. And I think, there's going to be a double outro. Where am I? Because we're going to play this first. We're going to play the last post. If I can find the link, because I definitely had the link. There it is. One momento. We will play this, and then we will have the outro. This is a Canadian video. It's Australian, Royal Australian Air Force.
this is 42 speaking. Welcome to the Resistance. You are not alone, and we shall walk this journey together. What about you, chum? If one brings a guitar and one brings a voice, then they stand together and make their own choice. Let us gather together those that can perform, and from the scarred timbers build our own platform. For from that grand house they tried to burn down, there's gold in the ashes if you look around. Let us gather together those that can perform, then from those scarred timbers build our own platform. Build our own platform. We will sing words of wisdom. We will sing for all time. Harmony, melody, and rhyme. We descended from minstrels in old days of yore. We will create a culture as we did once before, forced to stand by as our country was sold. Did you really think we'd leave that story untold? So one brings a guitar and one brings a voice, then they stand together and make their own choice. They have seen the future, the way forward is clear. Among us still stands a modern day Shakespeare. They have seen the future, the way forward is clear. Among us still stands a modern day Shakespeare. Forced to stand by as our country was sold. Did you really think we'd leave that story untold? We will sing words of wisdom. We will sing sing harmony, melody, rhyme. Harmony, melody, and rhyme. So one brings a guitar and one brings a voice, then they stand together and make their own choice. I have seen the future, the way forward is clear. Among us still stands a modern day Shakespeare. Never realized you could not kill a dream. So we will gather together those that can perform, and from the scarred timbers build our own platform. You're talking to 42. What about you, chum? If one brings a guitar and one brings a voice, then they stand together and make their own choice. Sing words of wisdom, we will sing for all time. We will sing for our people, harmony, melody, and rhyme. We will sing words of wisdom, we will sing for all time. We will sing for our people with the ancient trilogy of harmony, melody, never realized you cannot kill a dream. You cannot kill a dream. And we shall walk this journey together.
Okay, everybody, I've been 42, and you lot in the chat have, as always, been fucking amazing. Oh, by the way, Rich, I'll be getting in touch with you about the December end of the month stream. Gonna hopefully do like a party type thing where I have as many of the regular guests come in that I can. So I'll be sending an email about that. As I was saying, I've been 42. You lot in the chat have been fucking amazing. Good night. God bless. See us all next week. I'm out of here. Goodbye.